Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Darrin Schenck about leading others as individuals with a collective goal in mind. Darrin Schenck, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation. You have a really interesting background. I have talked with other collegiate coaches in the past. You coach a sport that I love, that I'm not any good at, but it's a great pastime, and that is racquetball. So you, I'll read your bio here in just a moment, but you have extensive experience both as a player and as a coach in the sport of racquetball on that side of things. But professionally, you're also involved with executive roles in organizations and sales and leading teams of other salespeople. So today we're going to be talking about, and tapping into both your veins of experience, leading others as individuals with a collective goal in mind. And obviously that's something that is super, applicable to team sports, but it's also super applicable when we're trying to navigate the complexities of organizations and being competitive as a business with a team of people to accomplish a goal that we all have. So it'll be a super fun conversation to dive into together. Yeah. As we get started, I wanted to share Darrin's bio with everybody. As a former professional racquetball player, Darrin Schenck spent 3 years in the top 20 in the world on the International Racquetball Tour. Now as a coach, he is in his 14th season as head coach of the ASU Racquetball team with a women's national championship and 2-time Collegiate Coach of the Year awards to his credit, as well as producing over 36 Collegiate All Americans. And let me just say that is incredible. Congratulations on all that success.
Thank you.
In his day job, he is the vice president of sales marketing at TriageNow, a medical call center for workplace injuries. They work with companies like General Mills, Goodyear, Tire Rubber, American Red Cross, UCLA, Liberty Mutual, and many more. Outside of his role as VP of sales, he is a recruiting guest lecturer at the business colleges at ASU and NAU, and within the local business community, offering sales coaching and general life optimization coaching. All super fascinating. I really look forward to tapping into your various veins of expertise and experience. Before we really dive on into the conversation, would you mind? I'm just really curious, as someone who just on the periphery likes to play racquetball casually as a fun pastime. How did you get into that, both as a player and a coach? And then we can move more into talking about this within the context of organizations.
Sure. So this is funny, but it is true. I thought it would be a great way to meet girls. So as a 16-year-old kid, I tried to make the wrestling team at my high school. I thought that was the way that I was going to get to college. My dad was a great wrestler in high school and college and beyond, and I was sort of groomed for that. Unfortunately, my freshman year in high school, I was wrestling off for position on the team, had a neck injury, and that was kind of the end of my my wrestling career, which is how I ended up becoming a racquetball player. Even though wrestling is technically a team sport, it is very individualized. And I was drawn to sports like that, having played Little League baseball, and just didn't like the idea that my wins and losses sat on someone else's shoulders. And to some degree that the same was true for them of me. Being a pitcher in particular, I literally held the ball in my hand, and sometimes the game was won and lost by what I did. And as a kid, we all like things to be fun, but there's a lot of pressure there. And so being going after individual sports meant that it was me that was benefiting or losing when things went well or not went well. And therefore I kind of thought that was a better fit. So I did meet a bunch of girls playing racquetball because right next to the high school was racquetball courts, and there would be girls that would hang out and go play. And unlike tennis, you can play racquetball by yourself. You can practice an awful lot of the aspects of the sport on your own, and then when you get to add somebody in to play against, then that works very well also. But as I got into it, I got a very early exposure to professional racquetball. The first event I ever went to was a pro racquetball tournament. And I was just stunned at the athleticism. All the guys were wearing these cool warm-up suits and they traveled around the country playing racquetball for a living. I thought, man, sign me up. This is going to be great. And it took a little while, but eventually I got to the pro tour level. And on that journey, I realized that I was not going to make, tennis player money as a racquetball player, but it was something I was really, really serious about pursuing. And so I threw myself into it. And at age 24, I turned pro, and I played a couple of seasons where I picked and chose the events that I went to. And then the last 5 years of my career, I played every event on the pro tour and made it into the top 20 in the world.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then from that professional career as a professional racquetball player, then how did you end up as the head coach at ASU?
So a guy who's now a good friend of mine who was on the ASU racquetball team at the time, they had a club, but they didn't really have a coach. They had a president who organized the group, but he wasn't a real good player. So he didn't have a lot of contribution in terms of developing other players. So he casually said, hey, could you, would you come down and do like an hour clinic for the team? I think there's some players that would really benefit from that. I said, sure, that sounds like fun. 1 hour of my time, big deal. Well, here we are 14 years later, and it's about a 12-hour commitment a week during the school year. And we travel annually to the Intercollegiate Championships. And it has been the most personally rewarding thing that I've ever done. I still have some amazing relationships with a lot of the kids that were on the teams. I have been to a couple of weddings. I still am kind of a mentor for some of the guys and girls that were on the team. Some of them as far back as 15 years ago. So it's just been something I fell in love with, and I'm a volunteer in that capacity. I don't get paid by the university to do it. So the rewards, that I think that reflects how much the personal reward is there, because there's no monetary benefit whatsoever. It actually cost me money to do that job.
Well, yeah, well, that's incredible. I mean, 12 plus hours a week, plus all the travel for free. It must be a passion and to be able to impact the lives of all the students that you coach. That's tremendous. Well, very good. And I was just going to say, I've referred a couple times, like I casually just as a pastime play racquetball. I look super goofy in my getup and I'm not any good. But it is a great sport. I'm better at tennis. Tennis is also fun. But it's a wonderful sport. And I love any of those sports like racquetball, tennis. I'm just blanking on the
pickleball.
Pickleball. Thank you. Pickleball. All these are great sports.
I have not made the transition to pickleball yet. My standing joke, even though it's not really true, but it's just how I look at it, is when I'm no longer considering myself an athlete, I'll start playing pickleball. Now, that's just my crappy attitude towards pickleball, because it's pulling a lot of players out of racquetball and into that sport. It is one of the fastest growing sports in the country right now. So part of it is just my sour grapes of how many people have either also started playing that and diminished their racquetball time, or just left racquetball altogether. Especially over the last year with COVID, pickleball tournaments or events are outdoors. Racquetball, we're all inside in the same club. That went away for over a year. So that really pushed a lot of people into pickleball as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, excellent. And as you mentioned, from the sports side of things, there's a lot of lessons to be learned about coaching. I have also done team sports. I've done individual sports, but even in individual sports, you're part of a team. My individual performance impacts the rest of the team and the overall team's, performance in the meet or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so lots of lessons to be learned. And let's transition now and talk a little bit more about in your professional role as an executive in sales and working with your sales teams, how some of these lessons have translated over into that kind of aspect of your life. What do you see as the difference, between the tension between individual focus versus collective effort towards a shared goal?
That is a tricky dynamic, and that's one of the things I loved about coaching, and that I love about my day job role. I have a very large group of people who are resellers for my service, my company's service, but I'm not technically their national sales manager, right? I'm a liaison, I'm an advisor. Sometimes I act as a closer. They'll start the process and they'll bring me in as the expert on my company's services. And so that makes it tricky to really get things honed in on having a true one-on-one relationship with somebody, getting inside their head and figuring out, okay, this person needs a kick in the butt. This person needs a pat on the back more often than others do, and help them in the right fashion. The end goal is to increase business, right? As a reseller of our service, a lot of them are insurance brokers and producers and people like that. So my company's service is an additional benefit they can provide to their clients that maybe some of the others companies do not. So sometimes it's the key piece to the puzzle of winning new business. Sometimes it's a nice add-on. So all of that has to be factored in every time. And that delicious uncertainty, I guess, is one way to put it, is what I find challenging and exciting about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that kind of a model, I think that's becoming more and more common in businesses these days. And so that's intriguing to me. I think more and more organizations are trying to figure out how to leverage human capital in a way that's also flexible for the organization, where you're not bearing a lot of the direct labor costs associated with the people that you're working with, and hence the rise of the gig economy, the rise of distributed workforces, and the type of model that you were just describing, I think is another outlay of that kind of an approach, and just searching for flexibility. So talk a little bit about how, when you have these people scattered all over the place that you're trying to help close deals, and you're trying to help stay focused on goals, and trying to help, them be successful, but also help your organization accomplish what it's, going for and trying to meet its goals. How do you manage that? And what are some of the tips and tricks that you've used to navigate that tension?
Good question. So I have a twofold approach. So the first part is I do exactly the same presentation to almost every prospective client, regardless of the size that the business is, the industry that they're in. It really is. I've got it dialed down to where I do a presentation that covers all of the basic questions, makes it very clear what the benefits of this program would be and how positive the ROI can be for certain clients. And then, so that becomes sort of on autopilot. I do the same presentation as if I'm doing a direct sales presentation to somebody that's going to come right to my company, or it's on behalf of one of my partners that I'm trying to help them land business, which will also increase the number of calls that we get per month. So once I figured out how to make that a really streamlined approach, it allowed me to spend a lot more time on the human side of things and getting to know the people that are, that some people in the sales world still have pretty hard quotas, and they're struggling to meet those. They're hustling all the time. Others have a little bit more loose approach where it's like, hey, anything I can add on is a benefit and my company's happy about it. So now I can really dig into the details of who needs what, who needs my, hand holding in some cases, or my direct supervision, for lack of a better phrase, and who needs my casual assistance. Sometimes some of my partners have gotten to the point where they've heard me tell the story enough that they can close deals without me, which is fantastic, because now I've outsourced my work to somebody who also benefits from sealing those deals. So that's really how I tried to tackle it. Once I broke those things into two pieces and really streamlined one side, it allows me to really dig in on the human side and figure out how I can best serve each partner that I work with.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership: Ordinary, Everyday Actions That Produce Extraordinary Results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Yeah, I love that. And I love your willingness to set up systems, scaffolding to help others to find success. So you can support them, but give them autonomy, let them kind of do their own thing. But then when necessary, you give that one-on-one attention, the coaching, the mentoring, the guidance, the motivation, even to help get people across the line, and to start to develop the successes that enhance their confidence, that increase their motivation, and ultimately, obviously, impacts their performance, but also your performance, the performance of your team. That's fantastic. And that's something, I think about back to the early days, but, even as a teenager, when I was in sports, or even some of my first jobs, those first kind of crummy teenage jobs that I had on through, young adulthood. I didn't have like a decent, good job, until I was probably in my early 20s. All the other ones were pretty crappy, but that's probably not unique to me, right? And so we all go through that process. The number of people that I can point to, the number of managers or leaders that were willing to take the time to invest in me, to help and support me, was a really small number. I can really only think of maybe one during that period of time, but they were incredibly impactful. They helped me. They helped me gain confidence in myself, in my skills. And it's funny. It's a funny thing, confidence, because there's a lot of things that will undermine our confidence very, very quickly, especially when we're new at something. We're trying to develop skills. And so we mess up, and if we don't have a support system there to help us, we lack the confidence, and very quickly we could downward spiral to the point where we just don't. It's not any fun. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do something I'm not good at. And then you either quit and go a different direction, or you just kind of muddle through, and you don't really feel like you're good at what you're doing. On the other hand, you can take the same person, both the same person in the same kind of situation, but with two different types of leaders that are working with them. And that person who has a setback, a disappointment, a frustration, when they don't have the support, they don't have a good leader, and even perhaps, heaven forbid, they have a leader that, uses fear tactics, or, is shouting at them or getting upset at them because they made a mistake, how that person's going to respond and how their confidence or lack thereof is going to impact how they move forward, versus the same person, same situation, but now you have an understanding, compassionate, empathetic leader who wants to provide the scaffolding, the support, and is willing to work with you. That setback becomes a learning opportunity. Exactly. And it becomes a catapult into like a positive future where you're learning and growing, and you realize, oh, I messed up, but that's okay. And now I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to get better. And thankfully I had some of that in my early years that was able to set me on a positive trajectory and kind of sidestep and ignore the naysayers and the negative ones. And I think in adulthood, it's the same thing. We like, as adults, to pretend like we've got it all together and that we're good. but we have insecurities and we lack confidence in a lot of things, and we're struggling through our day to day just like anyone else. And so we need to surround ourselves with good people. And as leaders, we need to try to be that leader for the people around us, to support them. And when we do that, then amazingly, that individualized attention not only helps the individual perform better, but now it helps the entire team have a better, more healthy dynamic. It helps them all work better together. And it just is it makes you look great as a leader. And it's a win-win-win all the way around.
Yeah. Yeah. As you mentioned, there's a direct crossover with my coaching experience into my sales coaching experience, right? I mean, even the names are the same, right? So I have the ultimate embarrassing story several times in my racquetball career. And I don't know this for sure, but I have to assume that I have lost more matches than I ever won. So in anytime I have a beginner level player who comes into their first event, they're nervous, they don't do well, they lose. I'm like, hey, let's sit down and talk. At the pro level, to one of my best friends, I ended up in Racquetball Magazine having lost 11-0, 11-0, 11-0. I never scored as a professional player in the top 40 in the world at that time. I lost to another professional player who was number 10, and I'm still here, right? Yes, it was embarrassing. Yes, I carried that around with me for a while, but the reality is it didn't change who I am. In fact, it probably made me stronger in that process. So don't think that this one loss that you had is a big deal. Trust me, I know the difference, right? And then same thing on the sales side. I mean, if you're new at something, I really, really encourage people to say the words, I don't know, but let me find out. The last thing you want to do is make something up on the fly or give a yes answer and then go verify it. You absolutely have to be honest and upfront with people and say, hey, that's a great question. I'm going to have to do a little research and get back to you. And that does a couple of things. That gets you off the hook for getting yelled at for giving a bad answer. It shows integrity when you follow up. It shows integrity in the beginning by being honest, I don't know, but let me find out. And then when you follow up, you're already establishing a pattern of, hey, this is somebody I can trust because they're not going to let the details slip. They said they were going to do something and then they did it. And even as small as that gesture is, there's lots of salespeople who give bad answers, make stuff up, don't follow up on things, and hope people don't notice. And when you can stand out from the rest of your competitors by doing something as simple as being honest and showing some integrity, you're on your way to being a successful salesperson. The rest of the skills will fall into place. You'll learn the product or the service backwards and forwards, and that part will go away. No one will surprise you with questions anymore, but you will have established within your industry a reputation that is very, very valuable, and that's hard to do if you don't go about that in the right fashion.
Yeah. And you just shared the example from a sales perspective, but the same thing applies to other roles within organizations too. And my goodness, the number of times I've had that happen to me where you're trying to get an answer to something, you're trying to navigate the bureaucracy, the system, you're trying to do what's best for your team and get answers. And it's so frustrating when people pretend they just make something up, or they don't do their homework, they don't check it out. And then they conveniently forget that they told you the wrong thing, or they just, like you said, they hope that nobody notices. That happens all the time. It happens far more often than it ever should in any organizational setting, in any team setting. And so you really do stand out. You set yourself apart when you have the personal integrity. And it's a simple thing. Let me look into that. Let me get back to you. Super simple. It takes the pressure off you though. Like I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be the expert of everything. Nobody expects you to be the expert of everything. And in fact, if I'm asking a question to somebody and they jump immediately to a quick answer, we have pretty honed BS meters, and typically we can kind of sense like, oh, I think they don't really know what they're talking about. And then you spend the next 5-10 minutes trying to like get them to admit they don't know what they're talking about. And it's frustrating. So, just admit like, yeah, let me look into that. People will appreciate it. They will trust you more. You will establish that reputation throughout the organization, throughout the industry, with your colleagues. And that, ultimately that's going to be a win for you, and it's going to be a win for your team.
Yeah, I did medical sales for about 3 years. And obviously when you're in the OR and a surgeon is doing a total hip replacement, for example, you either know or you don't. There is no, yeah, I think so, doc, try that, right? There's no such thing. Either you have a rock solid defensible, yes, this is the answer, and I'm basically stating my life and that patient's life on it too, or I don't know, so let's find out. Those are the only two acceptable answers. And so I, again, on top of my racquetball career, I took some of that experience into my sales career and really tried to be diligent about, not only for myself, because I am a huge advocate of leading by example, but hammering that into other people as well. And there's people that think that the used car salesman approach is the way to go because they close some deals sometimes and they hit some quotas and things like that, but those people aren't around for long, right? I don't ever get into an industry thinking I'm going to do this for a couple of years and see what happens. I'm assuming it's going to be a long ride, and I'm setting myself up for success from day one by building that reputation of honesty and integrity. And oh, by the way, my company has the best service, and let me explain how this works for you, right? It almost becomes, as people say, you're selling yourself first, because the product should be pretty much on par with your competitors at least. If it was exponentially better and you were the only one that did it, that company doesn't need salespeople, right? They need order takers. If they need salespeople, they need people who go into the field, represent the company well, but represent themselves even better, because you become the face of the company, and that one-to-one relationship with the client in many cases is what seals the deal.
Yeah. Very well said, Darrin. It has been a real pleasure talking with you. This has been a fascinating conversation. I notice we're about to the end of our time together, so I do want to respect your time, let you get off to your busy day. But before we close, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yes, thank you. So I do appreciate the time. This has been fun. I hope we can do it again and maybe expand on some things a little more. So I have a LinkedIn profile that is for what I refer to as speaker me. I do some public speaking and consulting and things like that. And in poking fun at myself, I decided to call that business Darrin Chatter. My friends will all tell you that I love to hear myself talk. So if you can't laugh at yourself, you shouldn't laugh at anyone else, right? So my website address is darrinchatter.com. And my LinkedIn profile is also Darrin Chatter. And so those are the best two places to find me. I'm a voracious blogger, so I push information out through blogs on my LinkedIn profile all the time. And anything that I do that's a podcast or when I get the permission to do so, I will post a presentation or a talk that I've done on my website, things like that. I'm kicking around some different book ideas. I don't have anything solidified just yet. But I'm sure I will do that at some point because I've written some books in the past, mainly about racquetball. So it's well within my wheelhouse to do so. I just haven't honed in on the exact target that I want to tackle just yet. But please reach out if there's just questions that somebody has. I love the interaction. I love the engagement. So please shoot me a question, whether it's through LinkedIn or through my website, and we can start some engagement. And if there's a desire to have some one-on-one coaching or have me as a guest speaker, let's talk. I'd love to do it.
Perfect. Thank you, Darrin. It has been a real pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out to get connected, to find out more about what Darrin can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.